number one fan. I'm your number one fan. I'm your number one fan. I'm your number one fan.
Visual 117,
Hey, Mr. Man. You've been a dirty birdie. I'm your number one fan. 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 I'm your number one fan, Mr. Man. You've been a dirty birdie. Yo, what's up? What up, y'all? Special beings, how you doing tonight? We're covering Misery, 1987 by Stephen King. Covering the book and the movie. Annie Wilkes, Paul Sheldon. This is great. This is a great book. The book is way different than the movie. Probably some special beings out there who've read the book. I assume everyone's read the movie. I mean, seen the movie. If you haven't seen the movie or read the book, that's okay. I did it for you here. If you have, I hope this proves to be a good, deep analysis of the book because I found the book to be really enjoyable. I mean, not only really enjoyable, but pretty complex. Complex layers within the book. And what I'm gonna go through here is I'm gonna take us through the book. I'm gonna do a deconstruction of Stephen King's 1987 novel Misery. And of course, this one is not in the canon of literature, but that's okay. This one really is. I did this one for me. I did this one for you too, but I did this one mainly for me. And the reason I did it is it's kind of ironic. It's because the books that Paul Sheldon writes within the book, the misery novels, are escapist novels. He wants to do something better in his life. He wants to do something bigger, but he ends up, writing these escapist novels, which prove to be pretty good. They are popular. Of course, he gets the number one fan, Annie Wilkes. And let me take these off. What we're going to see is that the hardship of what he goes through actually makes him a better writer, and he creates his best work doing this. I did this for me because I wanted to we can read for all sorts of reasons, but I really, I wanted to get away from the canon, get away from movies and from some of the books that we've been doing just for myself, and just, read something escapist. And I just thought I would do that for my own fun. And it ended up being, with good literature, it ends up pointing to something in our own lives and something truthful about the world. And I think it belies the name Stephen King and the books and even the film sort of belie a deeper complexity in this case. Now, actually, we've done some Stephen King before. We did, of course, I did Firestarter, the Stargate Monarch Firestarter analysis. I've done The Shining. I did the Kubrick analysis of The Shining. Of course, that was the Kubrick, but it's based in Stephen King. And I've got a whole list in the video description, the stream description there, of some works that go along with this. But of course, we ended up doing something that proved to be a great prerequisite for this novel, which is Arabian Nights. Who would have thought? Who would have thought that, again, the prerequisites pointing to the landscape of literature, and this book really is Paul Sheldon's Scheherazade, which is crazy. I did not mean to do that, but that's the way that literature works. I think that we oftentimes, books are so interesting, and literature, in the sense that we find not only a palette and a landscape of literature, and many times books are encoded with something within the human spirit, within the soul, where we look at the world, where we see that the past is prologue. And again, it sort of worked with this. I didn't mean for that to happen, but that's because, again, books do this interesting thing where the printed word comes from the metaphysical world of ideas, and we think in words, and then we put that down on paper, and they always remain the same. So just like in movies, where, I've talked about how movies do this weird thing where they make the person on the screen forever young. We know that. It's not like some sort of new take, but they make the person on the screen forever young because they always remain in that sense until the medium of the film itself degrades, which happens. We see that happening that happens with the internet, happens with all these things. But, you for instance, in the movie, James Caan would always be the age that he was when he filmed Misery, even though he was much older. And James Caan actually passed away not too long ago. It's another weird thing something else that's weird here is that, I covered Norm and Norm Macdonald's book a long time ago, and a lot of Norm's material and a lot of his guests Norm was such a good comic that his books end up being prescient, and you see that, we live in this world, we live, we die, and death not ends it, and that many of his guests have passed away. James Caan was not his guest, but Norm discussed OJ obviously many times, and then James Caan and OJ weirdly had this connection, this friendship through this book, American Desperado, that I've talked about in some of the other streams and on TNT. And so I think that's strange. It's not strange. I'm not saying it's that strange, but I'm saying that in terms of what we cover here in literature, I think it's interesting. What's really interesting about Stephen King's Misery, especially the book, is that there are really only two characters. The great thing about the book is that it does away with the old coot, right? The old, hey, I'm the detective and my wife is, helping me. We'll put it through our system. Right? We don't get any of that in the book. We get a couple of people who stop by that end up being like state popo in the book, but there's no old coot character that is trying to track James Caan. He doesn't do that. That is something that they put on for the movie. The movie's interesting, the Rob Reiner movie, because he took a lot, obviously, from Kubrick. Now the reason for that is because Misery and Kubrick exist sort of in the same world because of Colorado. They're both set in Colorado. It's in Sidewinder, Colorado. And he even makes mention of The Shining and Jack Torrance or of somebody at this place called the Overlook Hotel in the book. And I find that to be kind of annoying in the book. That's one of the parts that detracts from it. But that's just a couple of paragraphs. It was like a little Easter egg in the book. I'm not really interested in that. I'm not really interested in the universe of Stephen King or interrelations between his novels. I'm not saying there's not a place for that. I'm just saying I'm not really interested in that. That's not why I'm reading this. I read these books as one-off books. I never was a fan of Stephen King growing up. I'm not particularly a fan of. I'm definitely not a fan of It or any of that stuff. I'm not like a super fan, which is kind of healthy, I guess, for this book. So I'm going to look at it in a pretty objective sense, I think. And we're going to look at this with the same metric and rubric that we use, if you want to call it that, that we use for the other novels and works of literature, especially poems, but novels and works of literature in the canon. Now, again, this is no Cormac McCarthy. It's no Don DeLeo. It's none of those things, but it doesn't have to be. So we can look at this for fun. And actually, I think this is a fun book. It's pretty fun. Yeah, Kristen says, you mean you don't play Stephen King bingo when you read one of his books? Actually, I don't. That's actually a really good point, Kristen. I talked about that with Jamie not too long ago about, the red shoes and the old coot, right? If you've seen the films like Silver Bullet, if you've seen any of the film adaptations of Stephen King, is especially apt for that. But I don't think of that, and it didn't even occur to me to do those things when I read it. And actually, I think that's a strength when reading the books, because I don't have any sort of preconceived notions of going into the book. I'm trying to look at it objectively and walk into the book like it's the world within the book. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with doing the other things. In fact, you sort of find yourself doing that, I'm sure, especially with the films. But I didn't do that with the book. I actually got into the book purely as pretty much escapism. I like watching movies that are set in snowbound locations. It's one of my things. It's just a personal thing I like. It gives me comfort. It's sort of cozy. And that's one of the things that sort of helps me to escape the shenanigans of real life. I mean, I think I like watching that. I like watching disaster movies and survivalist movies. I like those things. They're fun to me. And so I went back and rewatched the movie. And when I rewatched the movie, I thought, I really need to read this book. It made me want to read the book. And so I read Misery. But one of the things that happens is, this is crazy. I talk about synchro a lot, and I'll get into the book in a second. But with synchro, bro, is that I was talking to one of my very good friends, and maybe she'll listen to this. I hope she does. But I was talking to one of my very good friends, one of my oldest friends, and and she messaged me and said, guess what book I'm reading right now? Misery. And I thought that was crazy because well, I'm trying not to be too personal in the stream and not to things have been tough for you guys recently? There's a lot going on in the world, and things just kind of, one thing happens then another. And I'm not trying to make this about myself, but I'm just saying things have been really, really tough. And, God bless my friends out there. I care about them. So it was weird that she reached out to me and said, I'm reading Misery right now. I couldn't believe that we were reading this book at the exact same time. It was very crazy. And God has a way of bringing people together, even through the words in a book that you're both reading at the same time in the world. So Stephen King, this is Misery. It begins with the first section, Goddess and Africa. And we're going to see what that means. One of the things that I liked about the book is that it has the wordplay, the sort of architectural wordplay on the page that I don't expect of Stephen King. He's obviously a good writer. He writes in a way that uh, you fall into what Jack Kerouac calls the holy contour of life. You sort of find this wave in his books, and you ride this wave, and you've gone through 120 pages very quickly. You find yourself going through the 300 something pages of the book very quickly. At least I do. I want, it's a page turner, but there's a lot of complexity and layers in this. So it begins with this section, and of course the you guys are gonna love this. The epigraph to the first section, Annie, is from Nietzsche. You're not gonna love that. Well, you are gonna love the quote here. When you look into the abyss also looks back into you, of course. And that's where Paul Sheldon finds himself, in the abyss. And one of the things that is incredible about this book that they don't do in the movie, that I really appreciated about this, is that, where's my phone? Oh, it's right in front of me. One of the things that's really incredible about the book that they don't do in the movie is the driving force of why Paul Sheldon stays in this cabin. Okay, so let me try and break it down for you before I go into the full analysis of the book, using the text as evidence. So Paul Sheldon is a writer, and he mirrors the speaker in the book. We look at the book in the third person, a third person, fairly, I want to say fairly omniscient. That doesn't seem to make sense, but we are limited to, it's not a limited narrator, but we are, in a sense, limited to the perspective of Paul and Annie. So we actually begin, in a sense, in media res, because unlike the movie where we see Paul finishing his book and his little ritual in the hotel room, we get that in the book as backstory later on, and we figure that out. And he goes out to his Camaro and he throws the snowball against the tree and then gets in the car wreck. We don't see that in the book, and it's actually unnecessary. I thought that was really tight in the novel, in the narrative. What happens is that he's already in the wreck, and it begins with inspiration. This is crazy. All right, check this out. So Paul is a successful writer. He's going to deliver his last book in the Misery series, and he's going to go talk to his literary agent, and he always finishes his books in a hotel room in Colorado. Okay. But he gets in a wreck, and one thing that happens in the book that doesn't happen in the movie is the idea of inspiration. Now, go with me here for a second. So being inspired in terms of a writer occurs with the kind of pagan idea of the muse, that the goddess muse comes down from Olympus and whispers in the ear of the writer and provides him with material, or at least sparks this sort of interest in whatever he's going to write about. Yeah. But what we get in this is more of a, what I look at as more of the, the actual Christian ideal of inspiration, which is that when God creates Adam and Eve, when God creates Adam, mankind is formed, out of, just loosely speaking, out of clay, and God breathes the breath of life into you, and Adam is born. Yes. So this is inspiration. When you breathe in, you inspire. And the beginning of the novel starts off with Paul lost in this sort of, what do you call this? The upside down, the sunken place, because he's been, and we don't know this till later, but he's been in a car wreck, and he's sort of slipping into a coma. But we feel the breath of life breathing into him. But in the book, the breath of life is a human breath of life, and that breath is the stinking breath of Annie Wilkes. So his number one fan rescues him, and she breathes him back into life, right? She resuscitates him. And from there, she takes him back to her home, which is ends up being this outer world. It's apart from civilization. It's just the two of them living in the mountains, surrounded by snow. He can't get out, and he's in this single room. And he is forced to do a Scheherazade. He's forced to write a book basically for her. She inspires him to write the book, and that's crazy. Now, at the end of the book, at the end of life, we expire. So people, it's like in the movies, in the movies when it's like, tell them that it was Annie Wilkes, right? And you breathe your last breath, or like the food expires, it goes off, it loses its timeline, it goes off, and it starts to rot. And so we inspire and we expire. In the middle of this, we find that Paul Sheldon has entered a kind of abyss here, the abyss of creativity, his life. But in the abyss, weirdly, in this outer world where he's been breathed into by this, she's described as an African idol. She's a kind of idol. She looks like a living, breathing idol, or like a demon-inhabited, somehow Gollum-esque crone woman. And in this place where he's forced to confront himself and his life and her and his own spirit, she weirdly breathes this nasty breath into him, and that forces him to make the work that he does. But somehow he actually comes up with his best work. But the part that is really left out of the book, of the novel, the part that's the part that's left out of the film that is in the novel, is his drug addiction. The whole book is about how he walks into this thing already not a recovering addict, but like an addict living with addiction in the past, and that he is hooked. She puts her hooks into him through the wreck that he gets into, and the wreck becomes himself. So when the car gets hobbled, in a sense, he gets hobbled, and that's why he's rolling around in this wheelchair the whole time. He's sort of mechanized. And so she puts her hooks into him, and it's the drugs. And he, every day of him being there, this is like in every page of the book, he wants more of this fictional drug called Novaril. And Novaril is a kind of stand-in for what in the 80s would be Percodan. And I'm saying that because of Stephen King, but I'm leaving Stephen King's own life aside with this. I'm just saying with the character in the book. It ends up being a kind of Percodan, and he, at one point in the book, he realizes that he actually enjoys being there. And at the end of the book, he's even going to say in one paragraph that Paul almost would be willing to go through all of the things that he's gone through, this torturous anatomical bodily pain, just to create the work that he does. So he really does typify the kind of drug-addicted, suffering artist in this place by himself with this living, breathing, nasty muse just to create the work that he allows himself out of at the end of the book. It's pretty complex and a pretty crazy layer within it. So this occurs at the beginning. So I'm going to read excerpts from the first couple pages of the book. First of all, it starts off with Umber 1, your Umber Juan Feun, these sounds, even in the haze. That's chapter 1. That really impressed me, even just chapter 1 of the book with 4 lines of a kind of prose poem, because it's onomatopoetic. We're getting the sound of the engine whirring, and we're lost. The reader's lost. We don't know what's going on. We don't know where we are, just like Paul Sheldon is lost, and just like he's lost in his own mind, because we're going to find he's been in a car wreck. He says, chapter 2, but sometimes the sounds, like the pain, faded, and then there was only the haze. He remembered darkness. Solid darkness had come before the haze. Did that mean he was making progress? Let there be light, even of the hazy variety. And the light was good, and so on and so on. Had those sounds existed in the darkness, He didn't know the answers to any of these questions. Did it make sense to ask them? He didn't know the answer to that one either. The pain was somewhere below the sounds. The pain was east of the sun and south of his ears. That was all he did know. Really impressive start to the book, because this is something that goes beyond the simplistic writing that one would expect in reading Stephen King, for example, and goes into a kind of a poetic, metaphysical territory where he's showing us not only, I immediately, I didn't know anything about the book when I read this, and I immediately knew exactly what he was talking about here. I think anybody who's intuitive and who knows about, especially physical pain, knows exactly what this is. And what's crazy here, what I really find crazy, I'm going to find in this next section, is that life comes down to the smallest details, the single moments, and this is one of the, I don't know how to say this in a philosophical proof sense. I that sort of escapes me. All I know is that in a literary and artistic sense, in one's own life, I know that this is how I know that like the kind of sense of causality doesn't, and a kind of fatalism is not what life is. To me, it doesn't make sense. If I just take it like that, it doesn't make sense to me. What makes sense to me is that each second, it's a miracle that we're alive. It's a literal miracle. We live in creation. Every second is created for us. Think about it like this in terms of the book. That we live, I'm going to kind of go a little weird here, but we live in life. That's not very deep. We live in life. We live, and we are alive, walking around. We have friends and family, and everybody who's ever lived had that thing, and everybody who's ever lived died. And there came a point where they no longer were, and now we're here. And Paul lives in this world, and all of a sudden this thing happens, a kind of Deus Ex Machina, which I think actually in the novel is not a Deus Ex Machina. It's actually that Annie Wilkes has arranged this somehow. She's arranged for the car wreck. That's not spoken. There's no way for, but it's not spoken. It's kind of ambiguous and leads me, the reader, to kind of think that because we know that she's been spying on him at his hotel. She was watching him there, and she knows where he is all the time. She knows that he goes there. So why wouldn't on the lonely road where she just happens to be the one to rescue him, why wouldn't she have arranged that somehow done something to make the car skid off the road? So she appears as a kind of Deus Ex Machina, but it's actually just to bring her back into her house. But Paul lives into kind of new life. He's reborn, and he's reborn into this horrible place because he's been inspired by this demonic woman. And I say demonic woman not as a kind of epithet. I say a demonic woman because literally she's described as a kind of demon creature inhabiting human form. She's awful. And everything she does is, in the Miltonian sense, to destroy goodness and destroy his way of life. We see that she's a serial killer later on, and she goes down the chain of killing, starting with her dad, and then it goes to her peers, her age peers, and then it goes down to the youngest. So she's reversing the order of life here into an order of death. And one day we will come to a place where we breathe in 1,000,000 times a minute or whatever it is. That's the most natural thing that we never think about, breathing. And there will come a time where we all want just one more breath. There's just one more breath. It's the thing of life, right? And then it will be no more. It's the simplest thing, just to breathe. And so Paul is at a place even below that where it's the pain is below the sound. He's in the sunken place. He's in the upside down. He's in total chaos. And he has to be reborn into this thing by this woman. And I found that incredible because for all of the pain that he goes through, all of the physical pain, the physical pain in the book is nothing compared to the pain that he goes through with addiction as a result of his physical pain, but it's a mental and psychic and spiritual pain that he goes through. And that is not in the movie at all. The movie is about his physical pain. You know, even the spoiler alert, guess what? Even the hobbling scene in the movie is not that in the book. It's much, much worse in the book. And Annie Wilkes is much worse in the book. So if you haven't seen the film, one of the things that I realized about watching the film this time is that yes, slow boy. Kristen brings up a good point. What's more painful, struggling for your last breath, or watching a loved one struggling for theirs? Well, I suppose that's an obvious answer, right? The pain of the suffering of watching your loved ones go through that is obviously the greatest pain, and knowing that they were there 1 minute and they're gone the next. And then when it comes down to struggling for that one last breath, hopefully that's not painful for us, right? At least not, physically painful. But what I'm just saying here is pointing to a thing where Paul seems to be alone in the world as a person, and he's stuck in this place where he and Annie have this weird Stockholm syndrome relationship where they almost become like husband and wife. And it's really, she is the worst type of wife to have. She is, remember when everybody talked about the Karen and all that? I suppose they still do. But what I'm saying is that she really is that. Like, she is the archetype of that. You hit my car, you cock-a-doodie. Why are you criticizing me, Mr. Man? Right, and then just gets in the car and drives off. One of the things about the movie is that that I found about Kathy Bates is that I saw this movie when it came out, like after it came out, and I was terrified. I thought it was very, very scary. And again, this seems to have happened. I also remember seeing this, just like I saw the original Dune, the David Lynch Dune. I saw this at my grandparents' house in the back room with cable on the movie channel, and I remember being at night, and I remember being absolutely terrified of the hobbling scene. Right, that's the famous scene in the movie. Right? Have you ever read about the early days at the Kimberly diamond mines? Oh no, please! I know you have. Please don't. Whatever you're gonna do, please don't do it. And so in the movie, what she does is she puts a wood block between his feet, right on his ankles, and she gets a sledgehammer and she breaks his feet, which I talked about. And I even talked about that recently because there was someone in a wreck somewhere and they like had their feet amputated, and it's hard. I can't think of anything like that's like existentially bad. You have your whole body, but you're on these nubs and you can't walk on your feet because what are you going to do? Right? What are you going to do? You're going to get a fake, you can get a leg, you can get a prosthetic leg with blades, right? You can be a blade walker, right? Or a blade runner or a blade walker, but that's your whole leg. This is just your foot. What are you going to do? It's just your foot. You're going to get new feet. I mean, that's just terrible. That's for some reason, especially what if it was just like the bottom of your feet? What are you going to walk? You're going to walk on what if you have feet, but you don't have like 5 toes and you don't have the bottom of your feet? So you just have like portions of your foot. That's just so terrible. Oh, that's just so awful to me. But what happens in the book is actually much worse. Do you want to know what happens in the book? You know if you've read it. What happens in the book is she comes in and she says this, and then she axes off one of his feet, cuts off his foot, and not even in one cleave. It takes her 2 to cut all the way through his foot. So she axes, just like Jack Torrance, and this is probably an Easter egg to The Shining. She takes an axe and she chops off 1 foot. So he's got 1 foot, and she chops off 1 foot, so that he's like a diamond mine worker. He's like in the mines. He's in the mines digging for gold. So the gold that he's digging for is the mental gold of the new book, and that he can't run away. And it's just 1 foot. So he still has mobility, technically speaking, with 1 foot, but the other leg is broken. But guess what? After she cuts off that 1 foot, what does she do? She acetylene torches the nub. She says, "I'm sorry, Mr. Dirty Birdie. There's no time for sutures." And she blowtorches his leg. So that comes at a point where, at that point, the pain is so great for him that he can't even feel it anymore until he starts to have phantom limb itching. So he wants to scratch the bottom of his foot, but there's no foot to scratch. It's just this. It's an empty space, and that is interesting because he's searching for something that isn't there, that it's going to give him mobility in terms of the lines, in terms of the paragraphs on the page. Like he's walking. Prose is much more. When you think of poetry, you think of, Ezra Pound said, a centaur. You're half body, half horse. You're shooting an arrow at the same time. All this stuff is occurring at the same time, and there's a certain continuity of movement with lines on the page. But prose seems like it would be much quicker, but it's actually more of an ambulatory style, because you're trudging through paragraphs rather than swiftly through lines of verse. So he has 1 foot, and then the other foot's up until, guess what? She gives him a thumbectomy. Golly, it's so horrible. She cuts off one of his thumbs. He has trouble hitting that space bar. And then, of course, he's missing like letters on the typewriter that he has. So he has to write in the ends in the manuscript. So he's missing specific, and of course, Annie has 2 ends in it. So it makes sense that the N button on the typewriter doesn't work by design, by her almost supernatural design, so that he can't write her name. Isn't that crazy? Yes. Melly says Paul Sheldon was killing himself with drugs, and being in that near fatal, torturous time with Annie Wilkes probably made him appreciate his life. Well, that is a good point, Melly. And actually, it literally does that. So he goes through. So the book functions as a kind of allegory for the artist, the tortured artist, and mining the abyss for gold. And it actually literally does do that. And it really, in a weird way, does work in the book. It seems to be something that would be totally hokey, but it's not. It actually really works. So he says, as time passed, he became aware that there were periods of non-pain and that these had a cyclic quality. And for the first time since emerging from the total blackness which had prologued the haze he had thought, which existed apart from wherever his current situation was, this thought was of a broken-off piling which had jutted from the sand at Revere Beach. His mother and father had taken him to Revere Beach often when he was a kid, and he had always insisted that they spread their blanket where he could keep an eye on the piling, which looked to him like the single jutting fang of a buried monster. He liked to sit and watch the water come up until it covered the piling. Then, hours later, after the sandwiches and potato salad had been eaten, after the last few drops of Kool-Aid had been coaxed from his father's big thermos, just before his mother said it was time to pick up and start home, the top of the rotting piling would begin to show again, just a peak and flash between the incoming waves at first, then more and more. By the time their trash was stashed in the big drum with "Keep Your Beach Clean" stenciled on the side, Paulie's beach toys picked up. "That's my name, Paulie. I'm Paulie. And tonight, Ma will put Johnson's baby oil on my sunburn," he thought, inside the thunderhead where he now lived, with no period at the end of that paragraph. And the paragraph begins with a lowercase letter, and it's in italics in certain points. So this is brilliant. This really is great writing. He's conveying to us, he's showing us his state of mind lost in this comatose darkness of a rebirth scenario, because he's being reborn as a child here, and then he's going to come back as a grown-up, but he reverts back into his child mind. And that's why we have The grammar is weird. The punctuation is weird. There's a lack of capital letters. It's like we're reverting back to the beginning states of language, and he's remembering who he is. He states his name to himself. I am who I am. The memory circled and circled, maddening like a sluggish fly. He groped for whatever it might mean, but for a long time the sounds interrupted. Sometimes the sound stopped. Sometimes he stopped. His first really clear memory of this now, the now outside the storm haze, was of stopping, of being suddenly aware he just couldn't pull another breath. And that was all right. That was good. That was, in fact, just peachy keen. I don't like it when Stephen King, one thing that annoys me about his writing is the inserting of these time-specific phrases and, like, cartoon segments and television references. It would be so much more powerful if he didn't do that, so much more permanent. And I suppose you can make an argument that that is specific to Paul Sheldon here, but he does this a lot in the book, and it doesn't mean anything to me. It doesn't work. But that aside, there was a mouth clamped over a mouth which was unmistakably a woman's mouth in spite of its hard, spitless lips, and the wind from this woman's mouth blew into his open mouth and down his throat, puffing his lungs, and when the lips were pulled back, he smelled his warder for the first time, smelled her on the outrush of the breath she had forced into him, the way a man might force a part of himself into an unwilling woman, a dreadful mixed stench of vanilla cookies and chocolate ice cream and chicken gravy and peanut butter fudge. Now, you might think that it is really gross, and it is. It's really gross and creepy the way that he just made that reference about violation. But actually what he's showing here, and this is bookended in the novel, what he's showing here is that he's going through a kind of roip by the woman who's violating him with breath to bring him back to life. It's violating his situation, and it's violating his life, and he's going to violate his mind and creativity into making him write this book. So it is a reverse roip. Do you get it? It's crazy. It's crazy how it actually works in the book. And the other thing is his vision of the pilings is crazy because, first of all, we just, in the member stream, just did an analysis of The Talented Mr. Ripley. And in The Talented Mr. Ripley, we get, especially in Ripley's game and in the new Ripley has no conscience because it's been psychically struck out of him by sitting on a beach and watching his parents sailing, and they drown and they never return, and he says, I feel like I could wait there forever. So that was his last innocence. We also got that in Citizen Kane. He's ripped out of his childhood. In this one, what's especially architectonic almost is the fact that he is remembering the way that the pier looks on the ocean because the sound of the whirring of the snow mixed with the engine sounds to him in his deep mind like ocean waves. That also matches the rhythmic and then irregular breathing in his lungs until finally he is brought back from drowning in his mind. And the way the pilings look at the pier, we have angular, long spine sticks holding up a pier, and his are, of course, this is foreshadowing, his is going to be cut off, so, as if he's falling back into a deep ocean. But he doesn't know that yet. But he does know that what it's telling him is he's looking at the pilings because his legs are broken. That's the way it translates in his deep mind. Isn't this great? He says he heard a voice screaming, breathe, and then she takes the Lord's name in vain right here, and this is actually foreshadowing because we're going to see that Annie Wilkes seems to be the most wholesome woman on the surface. So wholesome that it's eerie and there's clearly something wrong and it's a front. You know, like, look, never cussing and never like everything is a wholesome situation can get to a point for people where it doesn't seem real and as if it's a front or as if she is a human shell, right? But at the beginning and the end here, she sort of says the same thing, and that gives us an indication of who she really is. There's a scene at the end where she goes up to her what's called happy place in the mountains. Her happy place is actually a physical embodiment of her mental state because she wants to escape from where if she stays at home, she's going to end up killing Paul. So when she goes into her deeply schizophrenic, disassociative, completely bipolar, like the most bipolar person ever state of mind, she actually leaves her cabin and goes off to another cabin. And this is supposed to be an outer representation of her actual inner state where she has to go off to a happy place. But ironically, her happy place is where she also, I think it's indicated in the book, she's burying all the bodies that she kills. It says, the lips clamped down again. The breath blew down his throat again. Blew down it like the dank suck of wind which follows a fast subway train. What a great image. That is great. That is a great image. Pulling sheets of newspaper and candy wrappers after it, and the lips were withdrawn. And he thought, for Christ's sake, don't let any of it out through your nose. But he couldn't help it. And oh, that stink, that fucking stink. Breathe, the unseen voice shrieked. And he thought, I will, anything, please just don't do that anymore. Don't infect me anymore. And he tried, but before he could really get started, her lips were clamped over again. His again, lips as dry and dead as strips of salted leather, and she roiped him full of her air again. When she took her lips away this time, he did not let her breathe out, but pushed it and whooped it in a gigantic breath of his own, shoved it out, waited for the unseen chest to go up again on its own as he had been doing his whole life without any help from him. When it didn't, he gave another giant whooping gasp, and then he was breathing again on his own and doing it as fast as he could to flush the smell and taste of her out of him. Normal air had never tasted so fine. He began to fade back into the haze again, but before the dimming world had gone entirely, he heard the woman's voice mutter, "Whew, that was a close one." Not close enough, he thought, and fell asleep. He dreamed of the piling, so real he felt he could almost reach out and slide his palm over the green-black fissured curve. The pain was like the piling. The pain only appeared to come and go, sometimes covered and sometimes visible, but always there. When the pain wasn't harrying him through the deep stone grayness of his cloud, he was dumbly grateful, but he no longer fooled. It was still there waiting to return, and there was not just one piling, but two. That's his two legs. The pain was the pilings, and part of him knew for a long time before most of his mind had knowledge of knowing that the shattered pilings were his own shattered legs. It's so great. It's really good. I'm really impressed by this. So let's get to a description of Annie Wilkes in chapter 4, because a lot of this is about his physical pain, and that's going to be clouded away and hazed away through his opiated state. One thing one thing about this is that in the film we get Jimmy Caan, and I gotta say, Jimmy Caan. One thing that bothers me about the movie is that there is no way that Jimmy Caan could not get out of his situation. I mean, Jimmy Caan looks like leather and bulk. Okay, so the guy can't even move. He's like, right? He turns like this, like he's got no neck. The guy could just football lineback his way out of this house. And one thing that was good about Kathy Bates' casting is that she does appear to be a brick house of a woman who could take on Jimmy Caan, but still not enough. Give me a break, dude. He could put her through a wall. I don't care. It's one thing to be, post-car accident and he's got broken legs, but if you're in the situation where Mrs. Dirty Birdie is walking in and doing, creepy stuff to you, you can line back your way out of this house. Give me a fucking break, dude. That bothers me about the movie. So I suppose the only thing that about the movie and the reason that he can't get up is because he doesn't want to face the reality of what's happened in the books. And It's that same thing. It's about not trusting your gut, being susceptible to manners. And there comes a point where your manners, if your gut is telling you that if you don't cross the side of the road, that the guy coming at you is going to sledgehammer you, your manners go right out the window. We know. I mean, that is a. I don't know if that's if it's just a manly instinct, but get out of here, right? Get out of the house. So one thing that's interesting about the book is that the reason he can't do that is because he is completely hazed out. He's drinking that Waukesha. He is totally fetty-wopped out the, as Stephen King would probably say, out the wazoo. He would say something like that, right? But that is not enough for me. Look, man, I don't care how perked up you are, how perked out you are, and how broken your legs are. Get the fuck up and get out of the house. You can do that. This is not enough. It's not enough. So we have to have this kind of negative capability and we have to, what does Coleridge say? What's Coleridge's phrase? I'll think of it in a second. Not just negative capability. What's the phrase? God, now I've drawn a blank. What's Coleridge's phrase about Shakespeare? Somebody in the chat might know Coleridge's phrase about Shakespeare. Phrase about Shakespeare. Give me a second here if we're watching this live. God, I'll think of it in a second. I'll think of his phrase in a second. Anyway, so let's get to. I'll distract my mind so I can think of it in a second. Let's get to the description of Annie Wilkes in chapter 4. He says, the prescient part of his mind saw her before he knew he was seeing her, and must surely have understood her before he knew he was understanding her. Why else did he associate such dour, ominous images with her? Whenever she came into the room, he thought of the graven images worshipped by superstitious African tribes in the novels of H. Rider Haggard and Stones and Doom. Damn, did y'all know Chase and Tristan had a granddad named H. Rider Haggard that appeared in the Stephen King novel? That's pretty sweet. The images of Annie Wilkes as an African idol out of She or King Solomon's Mines. Have y'all read King Solomon's Mines or seen the films? Was both ludicrous and queerly apt. She was a big woman who, other than the large but unwelcoming swell of her bosom under the gray cardigan sweater she always wore, seemed to have no feminine curves at all. There was no defined roundness or hip or buttock or even calf below the endless succession of wool skirts she wore in the house. She retired to her unseen bedroom to put on jeans before doing her outside chores. Her body was big but not generous. There was feeling about her of clots and roadblocks rather than welcoming orifices or even open spaces, areas of hiatus. This woman is a battle axe. She is like literally a willing suspension of disbelief. I just thought of it. We have to suspend our disbelief. This woman is a total battle axe. She's like Ruth. She's like Norm's Ruth. She's spiteful. She's mighty spiteful. Most of all, she gave him a disturbing sense of solidity, as if she might not have any blood vessels or even internal organs, as if she might be only solid Annie Wilkes from side to side and top to bottom. He felt more and more convinced that her eyes, which appeared to move, were actually just painted on, and they moved no more than the eyes of portraits, which appear to follow you to wherever you move in the room, where they hang. It seemed to him that if they made the first two fingers of his hand into a V and attempted to poke them up her nostrils, they might go less than 1/8 of an inch before encountering a solid, if slightly yielding obstruction, that even her gray cardigan and frumpy house skirts and faded housework jeans were part of that solid, fibrous, unchanneled body. So his feeling that she was like an idol in a perfect novel was not really surprising at all. Like an idol, she gave only one thing, a feeling of unease, deepening steadily toward terror. Like an idol, she took everything else. Damn! It's crazy. And actually, she's going to do an idolatrous sacrifice in the book. She makes him burn his novel. You've killed misery, Mr. Man. You better start appreciating things around here. Let me find my clip. I got a clip from the movie that it's crazy because this is the sort of thing that seeped into my consciousness over time. And I sometimes say this just for fun with people. I do this especially with my sister. And I've been doing it for years. My sister will make me dinner, and I'll bring her the dishes or something like that, and I'll be like, "These dishes are dirty, Mr. Man," and I didn't even know it came from this. All right, so do you want to hear what she says? This is her. This is Annie. This is Annie. This is This is Annie Wilkes right here. Okay.
You just better start showing me a little more appreciation around here, Mr. Man.
You better start showing me some more appreciation around here, Mr. Man. She is like an idol, and she makes him burn his book. It's very Prospero-like. Makes him burn his book as a sacrificial idol as a sacrifice to her as an idol that she's going to make him create this new work. Why? Because if she's an idol, all she does is take. She can't give anything. And everything that she gives is just putting her hooks in him. No, wait, that wasn't quite fair. She did give something else. She gave him the pills that brought the tide in over the pilings. The pills were the tide. Annie Wilkes was the lunar presence which pulled them into his mouth like jetsam on a wave. She brought him 2 every 6 hours, first announcing her presence only as a pair of fingers poking into his mouth, and soon he learned to suck eagerly at those poking fingers in spite of the bitter taste. Later, appearing in her cardigan sweater and one of her half-dozen skirts, usually with a paperback copy of one of his novels tucked under her arm, at night she appeared to him in a fuzzy pink robe, her face shiny with some sort of cream. He could have named the main ingredient easily enough, even though he had never seen the bottle from which she tipped it. The sheepy smell of the lanolin was strong and proclamatory. Shaking him out of his frowsy, dream-thick sleep with the pills nestled in her hand and the poxy moon nestled in the window over one of her solid shoulders. So good. After a while, after his alarm had become too great to be ignored, he was able to find out what she was feeding him. It was a painkiller with a heavy codeine base called Novaril. So she's essentially feeding him a kind of Percodan. Now that there's going to be a kind of Percocet or Oxycontin that she keeps feeding him. And she really puts her hooks in him. And she knows, the thing is that what I like about this book is my assumption when I'm reading it is that she didn't, this wasn't a Deus Ex Machina where this happened and she saved him and she's saving him with painkillers. Because of his pain and his broken legs. What actually happens is, and this isn't in the movie, is that he wrecks, I assume, because she's done something to his car or to the road. She saves him, and when he ends up looking at his legs for the first time, it looks as if they've been pulverized. So not wrecked in a car, not, bludgeoned against the dashboard, not shattered or not, singed from fire, not cut on the way out of the window, but they've been pulverized as if she broke his legs. And then she feeds him a painkiller, which actually is the thing that keeps him there and puts him more in pain. So this is like an intense, long form of a kind of mental and psychic slavery that she's putting him into. A real hell world here. So much so that it tricks him into even wanting to be, he wants to be in this place. He's in a hell of his own wanting because of her. You guys, please like and share the stream. And if you want to support me, I really would appreciate it. You can hit that PayPal button. You can hit that Cash App. You can hit that Venmo. You can hit that Super Chat. You can ask me questions, make comments, make suggestions, do whatever you want. But please support me. I really would appreciate it. Let's move on to, let's see, page 11 here. She warms up like a toaster. This says, he says, why aren't I in the hospital? This was clearly the question that wanted asking, and he wasn't sure it was a question either of them wanted asked. Not yet, anyway. When I got to the feed store, Tony Roberts told me I better step on it if I was going to get back here before the storm hit, and I said, how far are we from the town? a ways. There was an interval of silence, and Paul was frightened by what he saw on her face, because what he saw was nothing. The black nothing of a crevasse folded into an alpine meadow, a blackness where no flowers grew and into which the drop might be long. It was the face of a woman who has come momentarily untethered from all of the vital positions and landmarks of her life. A woman who has forgotten not only the memory she was in the process of recounting, but memory itself. He had once toured a mental asylum. This was years ago when he'd been researching Misery, the first of the 4 books which had been his main source of income over the last 8 years, and he had seen this look, or more precisely, this unlook. The word which defined it was catatonia, but what frightened him had no such precise word, or it was rather a vague comparison. In that moment, he thought that her thoughts had become much as he had imagined her physical self, solid, fibrous, unchanneled, with no places of hiatus. Then slowly, her face cleared. Thoughts seemed to flow back into it. Then he realized flowing was just a tiny bit wrong. She wasn't filling up like a pond or a tidal pool. She was warming up. Yes, she is warming up like some small electrical gadget, a toaster, or maybe a heating pad. This is brilliant, because what I read into this is that her life, her mode, her way of being is ignited like a combustion engine or like an electrical device, because she looks like an appliance. She looks like a refrigerator, and she almost warms up with her personality like a toaster warms up. It's slow, it takes a while, and it burns easily. It also reminds me of electroshock. Matt, you're being glib, Matt. You're being glib. Remember that Tom Cruise interview? He talks about, you don't know the dangers of electric shock. By the way, he's right in the interview, obviously. But this seems to me to mimic the kind of mental facility, the kind of lunatic asylum where she would have been placed, but she's managed to escape like some sort of, she's not like a slug. She's not like a worm creature or a parasite like Ripley was in those books. She's more of like a Sasquatch or something. She's on the edges. She's on the perimeter of society, and she puts on a human skin suit to appear to be human whenever she has to interact with people. But we'll see that her mask of sanity, like Patrick Bateman, her mask of sanity slowly slips, and it looks like she's got clotted bilge on her face. She's wearing this pudge mask, and her eyes have been painted onto her face, and she's mimicking a human being because she's a complete and total actual psychopath. This is a great book because there are a number of sections in here where Stephen King really gives us great insight into psychopathy. Let me read one here. Page 50. Such an ego simply forbade certain lines of thought. These lines were predictable because they all stretched in the same direction, from the unstable person to objects, situations, or other persons outside of the subject's field of control or fantasy. No, to the neurotic, there might be some difference, but to the psychotic, they were one and the same. On page 144, he says, see. Let's see. She says, just? You got a funny idea of just, Mr. Paul Sheldon. But I suppose the troubles of a poor widow like me don't seem very important to a rich Mr. Smart guy like you. On the contrary, I think of your troubles as my troubles, Annie. I just meant that a lien isn't much compared to what they could do if you got seriously in arrears. Are you? Arrears? That means in the bucket, doesn't it? In the bucket, in the hole, behind, yes. I'm no shanty Irish moocher. He saw the thin sheen of her teeth as her upper lip lifted. I pay my bills. You forgot, didn't you? This is an inner monologue. You forgot, didn't you? You forgot, just the way you keep forgetting to change February on that damn calendar. Forgetting to make the quarterly payment is a hell of a lot more serious than forgetting to change the calendar change. And you're upset because this is the first time you forgot something that big. Fact is, you're getting worse, Annie, aren't you? A little worse every day. Psychotics can cope in the world after a fashion. And sometimes, as I think you well know, they get away with some very nasty shit. But there's a borderline between the lands of manageable and unmanageable psychosis. You're getting closer to that line every day, and part of you knows it. That's a really interesting insight into psychosis and into psychopathy. Mr. Dirty Birdie. Right. She okay, here's the thing with Annie. The reason that she appears the way she does, and this is obviously creepy to us because we know the story, or if you don't know the story, it's like you watch the movie and you go, oh, this woman's obviously a psycho because it seems like a movie trope. But actually, it's quite adept. She appears to be all of the things that we find wholesome and trad. She was married. Her husband has died. She's a widow. Now, okay, I'll just leave that there. She's dressed conservatively. She lives on a homestead. She does all of her own cooking. She does all of her own cleaning. She goes to the town when she needs to. She's a nurse. She takes care of her patients. She seems to be totally wholesome, right? She doesn't cuss. She doesn't drink. But what happens here is that is all a mask for her. And it's not even a mask that she's aware that she's wearing. It's a mask that she puts on as part of herself. That is part of her inner self. The inner wholesome self is perverted and deranged here because she uses those things as part of her inner self. Like she is basically the pig Misery. She has a pig named Misery after Paul Sheldon's book. And occasionally she does this thing where she goes, sweet piggy, sweet piggy, sweet piggy, Mr. Man. And he's like, what the fuck? What the fuck, dude? But see, to her, that's innocent. That's innocence. You know, the pig is obviously in the artistic mind or into the interpretive mind of the reader, an outer representation of who this woman is. You know, it's like if you put the dead body on the ground, the pig will eat it up. A pig will, remember in Snatch, a pig will go through 200 stone of human being in 12.4 seconds, including teeth and bone. You remember that in Snatch? But that's her. She looks like that's her, like she's literally doing that. She's not only a roiper, she's a consumer in the cannibalistic sense. There's obviously we can't help but think of the Donner Party. You hear that, honey? You saw it on the TV. It's the same area. It's all set in the same place. It's in Sidewinder, Colorado. It's also in a place where in the American West, where people are usually free to be Americans and to go west, young man, to make their own way, right? To escape the gross din of urbanity and the industrial sludge and go out west and live free, right? But for her, actually, this is a great example of how absolute freedom is where people like this also thrive. She's like a land shark. She's just feeding on other people. She's like a methed up bear or something, just going through the woods, just consuming and eating souls. And she wears this mask of sanity, but in certain times it slips. And the times that it slips are where her OCD, her ADHD, her DID, her MPD, her BPD, all these things that we have mental, diagnoses for now, they all come to a head in this one demonic being. I mean, she is like a literal idol animated by a toaster engine. And he's going to end up using that, which is pretty good. On page 23, we get descriptions of the drugs that she's on. I mean, that he's putting her on. And it's basically, like I said, like a kind of what used to be Percodan, now kind of Percocet, Oxycontin. He says he could have killed her. He says he could have killed her, but he doesn't. It takes him the entire book to do that, and it's really artfully woven within the narrative because the completion of his novel allows him to complete this phase of his life and to complete her life. So she doesn't die until the novel's completed. And one thing that's great is that another big difference between the movie and the book is that in the movie, he's forced to burn his own novel that he was writing that she hates. Burn it, Mr. Man. But in the end, he writes this novel for her, and then he burns the novel, and then he goes off, and then they want him to write a novel of his own, of his like experiences. But really, in the book, it's much more that what he does actually is he writes the novel. He puts the novel under the bed at the very last minute, and then he puts a stack of blank papers with the title page on top, and he burns the novel. And that will be what drives her to go to the ground, and then he's going to shove the burning pages into her mouth. Feed on it, bitch, is what he says. Eat this novel. So what's great about that, by the way, is the mirroring of her on top of him at the beginning of the novel, breathing into him, and then what he does to return to her at the end of the novel is he breathes into her, but it's with burning pages. So she chokes on the burning pages of the novel, and she ends up dying. Spoiler, she ends up dying by being crushed with the typewriter and then falling and bludgeoning her skull on the typewriter. But another difference is that in the book, she does escape from the house, which is what, and Stephen King, I appreciate about this about the novel, is that I was worried for a second that he was going to do this thing where, oh, she escaped from the novel, now we're going to have a sequel, and we think that she's out there somewhere in the woods, like the Squatch, but actually she just escaped from the house far enough to get to the barn where she collapsed with her hand on a chainsaw. So we can see the past and the future in this. She intended to get to the barn to grab the chainsaw to come back in to chainsaw him up. But instead, she dies as a result of the injuries she sustains from him and the typewriter. So the typewriter is what, and it makes it so that he doesn't kill her. She actually dies herself in a different location from a fall she herself makes. So she trips and falls and dies, and he doesn't like crush her head with the typewriter. So it makes sense that she ends herself. Isn't that crazy? It's really, really well done. I really appreciated that. I did the insight into psychopathy. Scheherazade is first mentioned on page 60 in chapter 26. He says, he dreamed of Annie Wilkes in the court of some fabulous Arabian caliph, conjuring imps and genies from bottles and then flying around the court on a magic carpet. When the carpet banked past him, her hair streamed out behind her. Her eyes were as bright and flinty as the eyes of a sea captain navigating among icebergs. He saw it was woven all in green and white. It made a Colorado license plate. Once upon a time, Annie was calling. Once upon a time, it came to pass. This happened in the days when my grandfather's grandfather was a boy. This is the story of how a poor boy. I heard this from a man who, once upon a time. Brilliant, really, really brilliant prose poem writing here. He's talking in dream language, and the form and the content work together, and it's really incredible because we see her as this living idol, and now we go back to almost a Scheherazade setting here in the Arabian Nights, which I covered, which ended up being a prerequisite for this. Really crazy. And that she's some flash, it's like Sylvia Plath describes in Lady Lazarus, right? With her hair streaming down and her eyes flashing. She's like this Gorgon, this weird Gorgon on a, not to be anachronistic, but like a weird Gorgon conjuring jinn on a magic carpet. And he ends up being Scheherazade because he's forced to stay in a place and tell stories to put off his death. It's Arabian Nights. Page 70, searching for opiates, pain the size of the whole world. This is so fantastic, this scene. This is so great. So he says, He'd managed about 4 feet before realizing he was going to do nothing more useful than roll the wheelchair past the door and into the far corner unless he could turn it. So what happens, again, difference between the movie and the book. In the movie, he escapes the room to get a look around where he is in the house and to see if he can escape, to see if he can find anything. He eventually finds drugs, finds a little envelope, pours the drugs in there, and then tries to drug her with a glass of wine. You notice, by the way, in the movie that when they're having dinner the night before he's going to finish the book, when she's like, you've been doing a good job. If you don't, I'll kill you. Also, if you do, because it'll be glorious, right? They're going to die in a murder-suicide. Well, what he does in the movie is when she turns away, he pours the Novaril into her wine glass, and he's like, it's funny because this is James Caan acting. He pours the drugs into the Novaril, and he gets it, and yeah, that was great, Annie, right? He stirs it like as if this is stirring it in. But guess what? When she spills the wine by accident, I assume in the movie that she spilled it on purpose because the scene where he was pouring the drug, where he was emptying the capsules into the envelope is from a lower angle, and we're looking at the foot of his bed as if she is looking through the keyhole, spying on him doing it. So she already knew he was going to do that. She already knows every other move that he's done in the movie and in the book. In the book, she figures out when he's gotten out of the room because she does the hair trick. And this is crazy. I've actually done this before. If you guys haven't done this, I've done this before, especially when I was living with people. But if you think that something of yours is being like, let's say you have I don't know. If you're totally OCD and you don't want people to go in your kitchen cabinets, let's say that, right? Because that's where you keep the stuff, man. You know, if it's like that, what he does in Dr. No, there's a scene in Dr. No where Sean Connery takes a hair and he lays it across the opening of the door. So when he goes back to his place in Dr. No, he sees that the hair is missing. So he knows somebody's been ransacking his stuff surreptitiously. Well, she does that. But then what she does is she says, I found hairs everywhere. I found hairs in the barn. You were messing with my pig misery, Mr. Man. And he's like, look, I admit I went through the house and I looked for all the drugs and I looked for all this stuff, but I didn't go in the barn. How am I going to get in the fucking barn? If I got in the barn, I would have escaped. And she's like, I don't believe you, dirty birdie. Right. In the movie, we noticed that the penguin on the little cabinet is facing like northwest or something. Let's say it's facing northwest because she's worshiping Paimon or something, but it's facing southwest when he puts it back because he almost drops it. And he uses the penguin ceramic later to throw through the window to alert the police that he's there. But in the book, the penguin takes on much more significance because it's a penguin sitting on top of an iceberg, as if it's a double metaphor here. We have this lone solitary creature who should be out amongst people, entertaining them. Instead, he's all alone on the iceberg that's about to float away. We also have the iceberg in terms of the layers of subtext, and the iceberg in terms of how the narrative breaks down. The narrative melts, and we get layers and layers, and we also have looking at the surface of things, and then we have the subtext of things. And the subtext in the movie, in the book and in the movie, is great. Pim sends $10 super chat. Thank you, Pim. Great stream, BLA. Have you read Stephen King's short story called Library Policeman? It's a perfect analogy of drag story time. No, negative. I have not read that. And thank you for the super chat. Really appreciate it. I think I will stay away from it. I really appreciate that. And like I said at the beginning, you guys, I'm not like a Stephen King fan. Not at all, actually. Like, not at all. I've totally avoided his work when I was younger. And even when I got into this, I didn't think I would, I'm not like into his work. I'm definitely not his number one fan. I'm trying to look at this as something different. Of course, you can only be objective to a point. I'm being completely subjective about my appreciation for the book now that I've read it. But Pim says the topic is heavy but not graphic. Thank you so much, Pim. I really appreciate the super chat. Thank you. Oh, great. Hydrant flushing planned for your area. Yeah, they just I just got an alert, and I didn't even ask for that alert. Thank you, blocked. They just did a study, and they said, oh, thank you. Now you're calling me. Great. Yes. It went straight to voicemail. Now you're blocked. Hold on. Yep. Yep. And blocked. Okay. So, yeah, if they just did a recent study of the water. The poison is just the glyphosate is just it's blowing with benzene. Everyone is completely fluoridated, and I think they looked into the microplastics and the heavy metal in the water, and they were like, "Oops, maybe that's too much," because there's literal metal glinting in the water. Oh my gosh, that's why I stick to the healthy things like my GMOs. I am totally fluoridated. No, that was random though. Okay, so before I forget, I want to say, because I keep forgetting about it in the back of my mind palace here, something I want to say about Kathy Bates, and it's this. When I watched the movie when I was young, I was totally terrified, and I thought Kathy Bates was terrifying. Now that I watch it, and I'm older, I think, Kathy Bates. Have you seen when Kathy Bates won the Oscar for this movie? Because she won Best Supporting Actress at the Oscars 1991, I think, for this movie. And she looks pretty fabulous. I mean, that sounds weird. That might sound weird to you. But first of all, I am now a Kathy Bates appreciator. I think she's great. I think she's a really, really good actress. I like that her roles, she is completely into the character in this. I like it. But that's also my criticism of the movie. My criticism of the movie is that Kathy Bates is fantastic in this movie. She's obviously like an iconic villainess or whatever in the movie. But she doesn't do. Who is calling me? Get the fuck out of here. She doesn't do like the book because okay, here's what I would have done if I were directing the film. Okay. If I were directing the film, I would have made first of all, I would have made this a lot darker. I'm not saying they would need to remake the movie. I hope they don't remake the movie. But if I were if I were remaking the movie, I would have done this way, way darker. First of all, I would have had James Caan do much more because he doesn't do enough in the movie in terms of we don't understand his psychic and spiritual and inner state according to his exterior state. It's not enough. I mean, look, right here in this scene, this is about as dark as it gets for James Caan. And he does look broken there. He's got a broken arm. He's got his broken legs. He's writing his novel. We see the snow in the background. Right? But we need more. There are like 100 times in the book where he cries. And I don't mean crying as that makes the movie good. Like Leo cries in every movie, so that makes it a good acting. That's not what makes good acting. What makes good acting is when you believe that the person is in such pain that it transcends the physical, and I feel your pain. You feel that pain yourself in your own soul because it's something that is truthful to human beings. And not just in certain situations, but you understand as a human, you want him to be relieved. You want him to find a way out of his pain. But the problem is that in the movie, the pain is all physical. And the pain in the book is much, much worse. The pain is something like he's in the middle of a labyrinth and he put himself in the labyrinth. He can't find a way out and he doesn't want to. That is the pain. That's the pain in the thing. And that's something that human beings in general can relate to. Now, if I were making the movie, I would make it so that Paul Sheldon experiences much, much more psychic pain because of his own drug addiction. The drug addiction in the movie is non-existent. He's getting pain pills, but it's non-existent in the movie. In the book, that is the whole book. The book is centered around that. The fact that so there's a great scene in the book. Here, I'll read you the scene in the book. As a sort of a sideline here. There's a great scene in the book where he's searching for opiates, and it's the pain. I was just getting into that. The pain is the size of the whole world. He says he had managed about 4 feet before realizing he was doing, He was going to do nothing more useful than roll the wheelchair past the door and into the far corner unless he could turn it. He grasped the right wheel, shuddering. Think of the pills. Think of the relief of the pills, and bore down on it as hard as he could. Rubber squeaked minutely on the wooden floor, the cries of mice. He bore down, once strong and now flabby muscles quivering like jelly, lips peeling back from his gritted teeth, and the wheelchair slowly pivoted. He grasped both wheels and got the chair moving again. This time he rolled 5 feet before stopping to straighten himself out. Once he'd done it, he grayed out. He grays out. He doesn't black out. He doesn't white out from intense high resonance, high pitched pain. It's into a gray nothingness. He's becoming a blob. The front of his mind only knew about the pain. It was the back that directed his eyes. He saw it near the door and rolled over to it. He reached down, but the tips of his fingers stopped a clear 3 inches short of the door, where one of the 2 or 3 bobby pins that had fallen from her hair as she charged him lay. He bit his lip, unaware of the sweat running down his face and neck and darkening his pajama shirt. He says, "Oh God, please, please help me." He slumped farther in spite of the pain. His fingers brushed the pin, but succeeded only in pushing it 1/4 of an inch away. There's a scene later where he finds the drugs. That's why he's going through the house. He's not going through the house to try to escape. He's going through the house because she leaves him in the house for 50 hours by himself with no relief. She goes up to her happy place to get away from him and from herself. And he's alone with no pills, and so he goes through the rest of the house trying to find her pills. Where is it? I got to find this one section. He says, okay, so this is page 77. Novaril, that's the name of the fictional painkiller in this. It says, he was looking into the linen closet again, and his rapid breath suddenly stopped. His eyes widened. His first cursory glance had taken in the shelves with their stacks of folded sheets and pillowcases and washcloths and towels. Now he looked at the floor, and on the floor were a number of square cardboard cartons. Some were labeled Upjohn, some were labeled Lilly, some were labeled Camp Pharmaceuticals. He turned the wheelchair roughly, hurting himself, not caring. Please, God, don't let it be her cachet of extra shampoo or tampons or pictures of dear old sainted mother. Or he fumbled for one of the boxes, dragged it out, and opened the flaps. No shampoo, no Avon samples, far from it. There were a wild jumble of drugs in the carton, most of them in small boxes marked samples. At the bottom, a few pills and capsules, different colors, rolled around loose. Some, like Motrin or Lopressor, or hypertension drug his father had taken during the last 3 years of his life, he knew. Others he'd never heard of. Novaril, where's the fucking Novaril? No Novaril. He pushed the flaps of the carton closed and shoved it back into the linen closet, making only a token effort to replace it in the same place it had been. Should be all right. The place looked like a junk heap. Leaning far to his left, he was able to snag a second carton. He opened it, was hardly able to credit what he was seeing. Darvon, Darvocet, Darvon Compound, Morphos, and Morphos Complex, Librium, Valium, and Novaril. Dozens and dozens and dozens of sample boxes. Lovely boxes. Dear boxes. Oh, lovely, dear sainted boxes. He clawed one open and saw the capsules she gave him every 6 hours, enclosed in their little blisters, not to be dispensed without physician's prescription, the box said. Oh, dear Jesus, the doctor is in, Paul sobbed. He tore the cellophane apart with his teeth and chewed up 3 of the capsules, barely aware of the bruisingly bitter taste. He halted, stared at the 5 that were left encased in their mutilated cellophane sheet, and gobbled a 4th. Do you get it? Yeah, exactly, Kristen. Junkie Joy. This guy looks, and he's going around the house, and he sees... take only every 4 to 6 hours, or he sees pain on there for pain relief, or he sees not without doctor's prescription, and he knows those are magic words. He sees them like he's Odin looking at runes at the bottom of the whirlpool. He looks at them and he feels complete elation. And what's crazy about this is that this shows you that the pain that Paul is suffering from is something that is far, far deeper and worse. This is so much worse because he could get this stuff anywhere he wanted. He's rich and famous, right? And he's been living in a place where he's had to put himself to the test, and where he's been clean all these years. He's been clean for a long time, and he's able to manage his life. But now, in the worst place in the world, the place where he's facing physical pain and actual, it's a prison. It becomes a literal prison, a physical prison. There's a prison on the outside of the snow. There's a prison on the outside of that where there's no roads. There's a prison on the outside of that where there's mountain ranges. But it's a prison of the mind and a prison of the will and of his spirit, where in the worst place in the world, and because of his physical pain, he cannot get by without this. And she's hooked him, and now he's hooking himself. So this is like, I just think, don't think I've ever encountered this before in a work of literature or a movie quite like this. Yes, we get train spotting, right? Yes, we get the goldfinch. We get all these various metaphors for addiction and for pain, where it's analogous to life and making your way through life and conquering your passions. But this is something completely different because he's been put in a real situation here where he literally cannot get by without this stuff, and he is willing to get his foot chopped off just to get it. It's crazy. It's very, very well done. So if I were making this movie, I would have Paul Sheldon completely different than he has in the movie. We have to have an actor in this who is able to show all of those things just in his face and in his eyes. And we don't get that in this movie. James Caan is great. I liked him. We did the Thief analysis, and I think he's great. He's obviously great in The Godfather. He's great as Sonny because he's got this like naive, kind of dumb sense of the world, and he thinks he's going to be the leader, and he's not, and he's all brawn, and then he's not. But we have to have something. Yeah, Requiem for a Dream is kind of a great example of this. That might be the closest one, but this is something that also transcends and supersedes, his drug addiction or anything else. This is like really cutting through what it means to create things as a human being and to get over and to get through problems, not only just of some oppressor, but of oneself. Because in the end, Annie functions as a kind of golem of himself. It's almost like he has conjured her up. We see the vision of Paul conjuring up in his dream visions Annie, and we see her in the dream conjuring Jin. But this is where all of this seems to almost be his own exterior nightmare. So we have to have that. The other thing about this book that they needed to do is that Kathy Bates, when I was younger and when you see the movie, you got to get, I'll say this. All right. So here's the thing about movies. You've got to get past the point where you're watching a movie and you appreciate that she's a good villain. That's like, to me, that's like level 7, right? Level 1 is, we get through various levels of movies, and Kathy Bates is like at a solid like level 7. She's like way down the line. She's a great actress. She's fantastic. She's really menacing, and she manages kind of the nuances of what they gave her in the film. But they should have given her more, and she probably could have done this. And the one thing that she could have done in the movie, if they had done this, if they'd gone far enough in the movie, if they wanted to make a real actual terrifying movie, they should have had this come out in her eyes. When you watch the movie, no matter what Kathy Bates is doing, no matter her, hey, Mr. Man, and then she gets the sledgehammer and, her nice exterior and her homeliness, belies her sledgehammering. No matter what, we can't escape the fact that when we look at her in close up in this movie, her eyes are shining. In my opinion, this shows that Kathy Bates, the woman, I want to like her as a person because there's certain things that many actors can't hide, and that's like when you see it in the eyes and there's a goodness shining out of her eyes. I don't know whether she's a good or bad. I don't know. I'm not saying good or bad people. What's a good person? But I'm saying when you look at her eyes, they're shining. She's got big green eyes. They're likable eyes. Now, maybe that was an artistic choice because they thought, okay, this makes her likable, and this is how she gets by with all these people, but she's got this nasty voice and this nasty exterior. But you look in her eyes, and people are like, "Oh no, she couldn't have done anything wrong." But they should have had this come out in her eyes. They should have had her eyes, literally, her eyes in the book go black. And this is, I mean, if they really wanted to portray dissociation and the depths of her mental illness and her demonic energy in the book, they needed to have this come out in her eyes. And a great actor could do that themselves. That sounds like it would be, that sounds weird. That sounds like it would be something that you would do in post-production, or you would have contacts or something. But a great actor, the great actors can mimic this. They can show you in their eyes something absolutely terrifying. People can do this. It's not something you want to do, but I'm saying there's not something you want to practice, folks. No, I'm just saying in terms of the art of theater, of acting, Kathy Bates could probably access this. This is something that she should have. This is something that comes, she's pretending, but this is something that comes from way down deep. And she probably could have done this, and that's lacking in the movie. That's my sort of deep criticism. If she had done that, the movie would have been way past those levels, and it would have been something where we look in her eyes and we are scared. Because Paul, maybe this is only acceptable and maybe this is only accessible in the book. Because when Paul looks at her face, he is terrified. And we know, if you ever come across a person like this, I hope you haven't. But there are people in the world, especially now, where you know when you come across certain people, you look in their eyes and you know that they are not there. There is something else. And there are no words that can describe that kind of terror. Because it doesn't matter who you are, that it's jarring. It's instinctual. It makes your hair on the back of your neck stand up, and that's what she does. Does that make sense? So that's what they should have done in the film. That's my criticism of the film. That's pretty far. But, you know, you need to go far. You need to go far. If you're going to make great art, you need to go far. And of course, he wrote the book. He did this. Also part of the book is a commentary on the fact that, like Sam said recently, you know, ideas are like, they cost like $15. It's the implementation of the ideas that matters. And we can have all the ideas and the criticism of the stuff that we want, but we got to actually do it. You know, you actually have to create things. Paul has a great passage on page 108. He says, "That's how I survive." This is his sort of voiceover interior monologue. That's how come I'm able to maintain homes in both New York and LA and more rolling iron than there is in some used car lots. Lame expression. Because I can, it's not something to apologize for. There are lots of guys out there who write a better prose line than I do and who have better understanding of what people are really like and what humanity's supposed to mean. Hell, I know that. But when the counselor asks, did he, about those guys, sometimes only a few people raise their hands. But they raise their hands for me or for misery. And in the end, I guess they're both the same. Can I? Yeah, you bet I can. There's a million things in this world I can't do. Couldn't hit a curveball. Even back in high school. Can't fix a leaky faucet. Can't roller skate or make an F chord on the guitar that sounds like anything but shit. I've tried twice to be married and couldn't do it either time. But if you want me to take you away, to scare you or involve you or make you cry or grin, yeah, I can. I can bring it to you and keep bringing it until you holler, "Uncle, I am able, I can." It's a great passage. That's a pretty self-inspirational passage here because, you know, I relate to this. I relate to, and I'm sure you guys probably relate to this. It's like, look, I can't fix an engine in a car, right? I can't, I can't do you know, fucking bank spreadsheet or whatever. I can't even make, man, when I see a PowerPoint, dude, my like heart freezes up. It just shuts down. I hate PowerPoints. I hate corporate aesthetic. I hate anything in corporatized language. I hate that shit. It's like anathema to me. I cannot do it. I can't do a science experiment to save my life. I cannot do biological measurements of things. I can't do that. I understand the concept of it. I understand the mental and cerebral concept. I just cannot fucking do it. Like when I took astronomy classes in college, I understand I understand astronomical studies of anomalies in the sky. I understand the stars, and I understand constellations. I understand, all the stuff in astronomy. I even understood. I had a professor who worked on the Hubble telescope and all that stuff. And I sit through the lectures and I understand it and I can talk about it, but I can't do the damn measurements of the things. I can't. I just cannot. There's something in me that can't do it. I can't, you know, uh, fix an electrical line. I can't do that shit. But I can. Everybody has a talent. I can read. I can read all day. I can comprehend books. I can do presentations. I can do public speeches. I can act. I can write. I can do those things. I can tell a story. I can write a story. But I cannot do the concrete things that other people do. And they can do those things. And it's great that they can do them. So I relate to this. Everybody has a talent. Everybody can do their thing. But I guess the key is that, I was talking about this with one of my friends recently that, when the people talk about, yes, Natasha, it is. Space is fake and gray. But when you talk about, no, but when you talk about the, when you talk about the 10,000 hour mantra that they came out with in the 2000s or whatever, all that stuff, the thing is that they leave out is that if you're really good, if you want to be really good at something, then you pour your 10,000 hours into it. But even the thought of that is illusory because that means that you're putting integers, you're monetizing, you're enumerating the thing you're doing as if you do the thing and you have to measure the time and you will be sufficient at it when you're done. But everybody knows that the people who are great at something, it goes beyond that into something metaphysical, into something abstract. Okay? For instance, to take an extreme example, Mozart or Shakespeare, who are the best of humans doing these things ever, if they do those things, it's not that they are thinking about the hours, it's that they're good at the thing and they put themselves through absolute torture through some sort of self-metric, knowing what is good. And they will do anything to do it. They will do anything, even suffer physically or die to make that thing. They will make that thing no matter what. A person who's great at guitar, it's not that somebody makes them practice all the time. Maybe it starts off like that. They're good at something and then someone makes them practice. It's like Tiger Woods playing golf. Like, he probably showed that he was good at golf, and then he's put on and he's trained by his dad and whatever. We won't go into that. But making him do that thing all the time to establish some sort of discipline. But once that becomes ingrained within him, he's never without the club. They're never without the guitar in your hand. The guitar becomes an extension of your arm and your hand. You will never be without it. If you're a great drummer, right? If someone's a great drummer, then they don't have to make themselves think about drumming all the time. They just do it. Just do it. If you're tired of failing, then stop giving up. Just do it. No, Shy is right. You just do the thing. You do what you're good at, and then it ends up being the only thing that you want to do, and you do that all the time. Just do it. If you're tired of not succeeding, then stop giving up. But what I love about Annie Wilkes in this, I don't love it about her, but what I love about the way that her character is written in this is how she'll be like this. Okay. This is Annie Wilkes. She'll be like, listen, Mr. Dirty Birdie, did you know I had to go to the store to get you a new ream of that teletype paper? Ice cream was on sale. The ice cream was on sale. So I got some more back. And they didn't have the Red Bull. Do you see what I'm saying? People probably thought I froze there. She is in the middle of a conversation. She gets lost into her mind and her thoughts. The conversation continues, and she picks up in the middle of it on the outside. That's really, really unique in this. That is incredibly evocative, the way that Stephen King writes that in the book, and it's in the movie at certain times. She says yes until the rains stop. The rains make me go into the sunken place. The mountains are full of meadows. And she doesn't blink. Right, she doesn't blink. What was that rant about? Oh, yeah. So, okay, so let's see what else. There's the other thing. The other thing that's interesting in this book is Natasha thought I definitely froze. Yeah, so I'm not going to freeze here. Okay, I'm not freezing. Don't cut me off. I'm not freezing. I'll do it one more time. I want you to write this book, Paul. Ice cream is really tasty at this time of night. Right? It's like, why blink? Why even bother blinking? The window washers aren't working on the outside. The mask of sanity slips. Right? So, another thing that's interesting about the book, I was just going to bring this up, is that there is a Hamlet device in this. We get the book within the book, right? The play within the play. Paul has to write misery and misery's child and all this stuff within the book. But it forms a kind of play within the play in Hamlet. So Hamlet, remember we did Hamlet, Poem Unlimited, Harold Bloom's Poem Unlimited. What he does in Hamlet is, and it's up to debate, and it's I've seen it done in both ways, is that he either literally goes insane in the book and then puts on the play The Mousetrap, and then this allows him to fulfill his aim, or come back to sanity, or it's all a ruse to bring out, to catch out through allegory, through a kind of parallel story, the bad guys in the book, which would be Claudius and Gertrude. And remember, in my analysis of Hamlet, he is spurned on doing this by a demonic force, which is the so-called ghost of his father, who has all of the trappings of a demon. I mean, he's a ghost. The ghosts are demons. So he comes back as a demon, right? Swear by thy sword. Swear by thy sword. And he puts him on this revenge path where he has to neutralize his whole family. But the important thing is that in the play Hamlet, he puts on the mousetrap, and the mousetrap is supposed to be catching the mouse. The mouse is the rodent Claudius, who has somehow skeezed his way into the kingdom and has poured poison in the ear of his brother, Hamlet Sr. And Hamlet has to use the mousetrap to try and catch the bad guys so that he can fulfill the purpose of the play. But in this book, what happens is there's a scene where Annie Wilkes comes into the room and she's dangling a mousetrap with a giant rat. And the rat is still alive. And she's holding the rat, and she's got this goblin slop all over her. Goblin slop and stink and bacon grease and just squinching gloips all over her. She says, "Oogie boogie." And she just stinks. And her mask of sanity is slipping. She's wearing a pink robe, but her hair's she's got dirt all over her and glop and gloop. Her hair's all mussy and messy. Her face, it looks like it's sagging. And her eyes look like pinpricks on a mask. And she says, like, sometimes the rain comes, and the rain is a bad thing. And this is obviously a result of some sort of, this must be like a psychic trigger to when her mind was fractured when her father died or when she killed her father. I don't know. But she's holding the rat in her hand, and she squeezes the rat to death, throws the carcass in the corner, and then licks the blood off of her fingers. And Paul is like, "Get me the fuck out of here, dude. This place sucks. It literally sucks. I mean, this place really sucks. You're a real jerk." Right? But she tells him, "Don't you get it, Paul? You know that. Let's not fool ourselves anymore. You are never leaving here. You are the mouse, and this place is my trap. And I'm the spider woman. I'm the dragon lady. Everything she does is to snare him in her literal vampire potbelly goblins." Right? Chicken neck ninnies, except she's a bull neck. She's a bull neck pig ninny. She's a bull neck pig Winnie. Sweet piggy. We got a blue ribbon special here, folks. A real blue ribbon special. Well, what he does is she puts him in the basement when she leaves, when she gets a visit from the cops, and then she kills the cop. And it's not like in the movie where, the old coot comes to see her and she shotguns him from behind. Instead, in the movie, she's holding a cross in her hand and she stabs him in the back. She's praying. She says she's praying and that she's been told exactly what to do. Have him create the book and then they'll die in a double unaliving. But instead, when the cop shows up, she stabs him in the back with a cross, shatters and splinters it, and then throws it away because she's a demon. She's a demon woman in human form. And then she puts him in the basement while she goes. Now, this is an incredible scene because when she puts him in the basement, going into the basement of the house is a representation of Paul retreating within his own mind. I mean, they're literally doing that, the first thing, but the subtext, the underside of the iceberg that we talked about earlier, is that Paul is now going down into the deep waters. And when he goes down there, she leaves him a shot of scopolamine. She says it's a morphine base. You can use it if you get really painful because it's damp down there and his leg is going to ache because at this point she's cut off his foot and she blowtorched the nub. So she puts him down there and says, use it, and he puts it off until finally he has to use it, and then he goes into the gray zone. But when he wakes up, he hears the rats. Right? He hears like pig rats. But then it's at that point that he realizes what he's going to do. He goes into the basement, and that's when he realizes he's going to snare her in his own mousetrap. So the mousetrap gets turned around, and he's going to snare her by finishing the book, and then when she comes to inspect it, he's going to burn it just like she made him burn his draft of his book that he brought with him. And she is so excited for this book, man. She is loving it. But what she's actually done here over the course of the book, and he recognizes this, is that she actually provided him with what he needed to transcend his own work and to create something great. It wasn't just through personal experience, but it was through accessing the deepest parts of his brain and his own spirit. And that is that he creates this great book about misery and that he fake burns it. And then, again, he's going to choke her with the ashes of the fake book, which is, it adds a whole other triple meta layer that it's a fake book that he chokes her with and that she dies of her own accord falling on the typewriter and then having this deep gash wound in her head, which she goes out to the barn, gets the chainsaw, and then dies. And that it's crazy. It's really well done. She only has a few books in her house. She reads Somerset Maugham. Somerset Maugham, you remember, wrote the book about Aleister Crowley, where Aleister Crowley was the magician. I found that interesting in the book. Mudge sends $2 and says, yo, just got in. Do you like the book or movie more? Hey, Mud, good to see you. Thank you for that $2. And I definitely like the book more. This is a great example of the book is, we'll start over since you just got here. No, everybody, please, the book is way, not just better than the movie, it is much more full and complex. It's a completely different work than the movie. I enjoy the movie. But I enjoy the movie in a kind of, it becomes melodramatic. It's like a comical sense. You've been a bad man, Mr. Man. You didn't do the dishes. Like, there's a scene in the movie where he's like, I need my pills. Please, Annie, I need my pills. And she like smashes a glass in the corner, smashes glass, her psychic breaking. And then she's like, look what you made me do, you dirty birdie, Mr. Man. And she goes and gets a mop bucket and cleans up all the slop. And then she puts it into this mop bucket. It's all, nasty dirt water. And she says, oh, you need some water? You need something to wash down your pills? Well, drink this. And she waterboards him with the slop water. And he drinks it. That's a great scene because he doesn't shy away from it. He wants his pills so bad that he's got to swallow them. His mouth is so dry. He's injured. He's in pain. He's in deep pain. And so he drinks the slop water just so he can swallow his pills. And she says, you better not throw that up, Mr. Man. You'll throw up all the Novaril. God, it's so demented. All right, so I wrote, chapter 15 is insane. That's my only note here for this. So let me read some of chapter 15 for you here because this is really well done. When he came back, this is page 158. He says, when he came back, he thought at first he must still be dreaming. It was just too surreal, like the night when she had rolled the barbecue pot in here. Also interesting that it's a barbecue pot and that Misery is a pig and that she's a pig woman and that the sacrifice occurs in the cauldron of the barbecue pot. Annie was sitting on the side of the bed. She had set a glass of water filled with Novaril capsules on the bed table. That's just like, again, it's like an Oxycontin. In her other hand, she had a Victor rat trap. There was a rat in it, too, a large one with mottled gray-brown fur. The trap had broken the rat's back. Its rear feet hung over the sides of the trap's board, twitching randomly. There were beads of blood in its whiskers. This was no dream, just another day lost in the funhouse with Andy. He's in Clown World. Hey, welcome to High IQ Book Enjoyer Mud. Hey, thanks, you guys, for grabbing those memberships and for those membership giveaways. I really appreciate that. Her breath smelled like the corpse decomposing in rotting food. Annie? He straightened up, eyes moving between her and the rat. Outside it was dusk, a strange blue dusk filled with rain. It sheeted against the window. Strong gusts of wind shook the house, making it creak. Whatever had been wrong with her this morning was worse tonight. Much worse. He realized he was seeing her with all her masks put aside. This was the real Annie, the inside Annie. The flesh of her face, which had previously seemed so fearsomely solid, now hung like lifeless dough. Her eyes were blanks. She had dressed, but her skirt was on inside out. There were more wheels on her flesh, more food splattered on her clothes. When she moved, they exhaled too many different aromas for Paul to count. Nearly one whole arm of her cardigan sweater was soaked with a half-dried substance that smelled like gravy. Oh, my gosh. This is just total hell world. Can you imagine being in there with this lady? Get out. Do what you do. You got to do. Get out of this clown house. Right? Whatever had been wrong with her, it says she held up the trap. They come into the cellar when it rains. The pinned rat squeaked feebly and snapped at the air. Its black eyes, infinitely more lively than those of its captor, rolled. I put down traps. I have to. I smear the trip plates with bacon grease. I always catch 8 or 9. Sometimes I find others. She blanked then. Blanked for nearly 3 minutes, holding the rat in the air, a perfect case of waxy catatonia. Paul stared at her, stared at the rat as it squeaked and struggled, and realized that he had actually believed that things could get no worse. Untrue. Unfucking true. At last, as she had begun to think she had just sailed off into oblivion forever with no fuss or fanfare, she lowered the trap and went on as if she had never stopped speaking. Drowned in the corners, poor things. Okay, she grossly kills the rat. And she says, how its heart beats, how it struggles to get away, as we do, Paul, as we do. We think we know so much, but we really don't know any more than a rat in a trap, a rat with a broken back that thinks it still wants to live. The hand holding the rat became a fist. Her eyes never lost that blank, distant cast. Paul wanted to look away and could not. Tendons began to stand out on her inner arm. Okay, then I'm going to skip that description. She says, now it's at peace. Then she says, I'll get my gun, Paul, shall I? Maybe the next world is better for rats and people both. Not that there's much difference between the two. And thankfully, he says, not until I finish my book, bitch. Damn, I'm writing this damn thing for you. You need to chill out and go eat some more Hogwarts ice cream or whatever the fuck. Oh my gosh. This was difficult because he felt as if someone had shot his mouth full of Novocaine. He had seen her low before, but he'd seen nothing like this. He wondered if she'd ever had a low as this before. This was how depressives got just before shooting all the members of their families, themselves last. It was the psychotic despair of the woman who dresses her children in their best, takes them out for ice cream, walks them down to the nearest bridge, lifts one into the crook of each arm, and jumps over to the side. Fucking hell, dude. He said, I'm closer to death than I've ever been in my life, he thought, because she means it. This bitch means it. Misery? She asked. Almost as if she had never heard the word before, but there'd been a momentary fugitive sparkle in her eyes. Hadn't there? He thought so. Misery, yes. I agree that the world is a pretty crappy place most of the time, especially when it rains. I mean, I've been in a lot of pain these last few weeks, and pain? She looked at him with a sallow, sunken contempt. You don't know what pain is. You don't have the slightest idea, Paul. No, I suppose not. Not compared to you. That's right. But I want to finish this book. Annie, do you get me? Yes. I do want to know how it comes out. That's the only thing left in the world that I still want, I suppose. Slowly, apparently unaware of what she was doing, she began to suck the rat's blood from her fingers. Paul jammed his teeth together and grimly told himself he would not vomit. Would not. It's like waiting for the end of one of those chapter plays. Holy shit, dude. So anyway, he gets out of the room one more time. She goes away to her happy place. He gets out of the room. He looks around the house and he finds her trophy case, which is basic. I mean, for her, it's a scrapbook. And in the scrapbook, he finds all of the clippings she's made of all of her kills, including her father who plunged to his death, a classmate who plunged to his death, a bunch of nurses that she killed to get ahead. One thing that's not good is that in the movie and in the book, we get this thing where it's like newspaper articles, which newspaper articles often function. Sorry, I can't breathe. Newspaper articles often function as a prismatic view into the inner state of the character and into a kind of expository look into the background of the narrative. But what happens here is we see articles about local girl makes good, becomes head nurse. There's not articles like that. I mean, maybe there are. Have you ever seen an article like that? Like, have you ever seen a newspaper article when they had newspaper articles of like, local popular boy becomes head of department at bank? It's like, what? Who gives a shit? So this is just exposition. I found that kind of cheap. But what it does is it shows us that when she becomes the head nurse at the hospital, the dragon lady, she's deemed the dragon lady, ends up taking out whole swaths of the NICU, I guess. So like I said, she becomes a total serial killer and goes from killing her parents all the way down the scale, reverse into complete innocence until she's going to end up with herself. She wants to annihilate the whole world. And her reason that she shows, by the way, is in the book is that they were a bunch of brats. They didn't know how to have order. They make everything disorderly. I don't like any sludge in my house. It's like, listen, lady, they didn't do this. You did this. You did this. So she's just some demon woman. She talks about depraved, degenerate, dope-shooting hippies like William Faulkner and Hemingway and Fitzgerald. Meanwhile, she's the one doing this to him. The epigraph to the third section, Paul. It's no good. I've been trying to sleep for the last half hour, and I can't. This is from John Fowles, the collector. I'm sorry, John Fowles, the collector. Writing here is a sort of drug. It's the only thing I look forward to. This afternoon, I read what I write, and it seemed vivid. I know it seems vivid because my imagination fills in all the bits another person wouldn't understand. I mean, it's vanity, but it seems a sort of magic. and I just can't live in this present. I would go mad if I did. Eventually, we get her again described on page 2 of 41 as a kind of weird goddess. I wrote, she's a blaspheming satanic demon, half woman, half lawn boy, female centaur. So when she shows up, when the cop shows up, Paul watched her plant the cross and then read the Bible over the grave by the light of a new risen spring moon. She's a witch, right? Hold on, Pim. I'll get to that in a second. Shouts out to Pim for that $5 super chat. Pim had watched her plant the Pim. Now she was holding the cross like a spear. The dirt darkened point of its vertical post pointed squarely at the trooper's back. Behind you, look out! With a thin, warbling cry, Annie plunged Bossy's cross into the trooper's back. His face was the face of a man either trying to pass a kidney stone or having a terrible gas attack. The cross began to droop toward the ground as the trooper approached the window in which Paul sat, his gray invalid's face framed by jags of broken glass. The cop reached slowly over his shoulders with both hands. He looked to Paul like a man trying very hard to scratch that one itch you could never quite reach. Annie dismounted the lawn boy. This is a lawnmower, riding lawnmower, and had been standing frozen, her tented fingers pressed against the peaks of her breasts. Now she lunged forward and snatched the cross out of the trooper's back. Annie drove the cross point first into his belly, like she's a reverse vampire here, right? Annie pulled the cross free again. Its sharpened point had broken off, leaving a jagged, splintery stump, and drove it into the back between his shoulder blades. She looked like a woman trying to kill a vampire. There you go. The first two blows had perhaps not gone deep enough to do much damage, but this time the cross's support post went at least 3 inches into the kneeling trooper's back, driving him flat. This is page 241. Annie, stop it, he says. She looked at him, her dark eyes momentarily as shiny as coins, her hair fungus frowsy around her face, the corners of her mouth drawn up in the jolly grin of a lunatic who has, at least for the moment, cast aside all restraints. Then she looked back down at the state trooper. Yeah, she's a complete psycho. He describes her as a half woman, half lawn boy, full centaur. And guess what? He has the thing in here. Look at his picture. He has the thing in here that they have in all of these books. I've brought this up like so many times. I just brought it up recently in one of the other things we read. I brought it up in Ripley. I brought it up about the Prince Harry book that I need to cover. If you want me to cover the Prince Harry autobiography, which I think would be really interesting for us to cover, because I'm the only one who's going to read it. If any of you guys have read it, then you've read it. But I can't think of anybody else who's going to read it. But if you want me to do that, please super chat. Give me a fat chat here on PayPal, Cash App, or Venmo. The links are in the description, in the video description. Please do that because I will cover that, and I think it will be really, really interesting because Prince Harry has that thing in the book about what he says right here, which I'm about to cover. And drop me a fat chat. Drop me a sponsor stream for me to do this. He says he stretched out his hand for it. Annie swerved and ran over both his reaching hand and his forearm. Blood squirted from the lawn boy's gas exhaust in an amazing jet. They always do this in these books. It's the singular image that is common to all serial killer accounts and to books about psychopaths. We saw this in American Psycho. We've seen this so many times. A spray of blood, a jet of blood, a fan of blood, a curtain of blood. We saw it in The Shards with Bret Easton Ellis. The way that the blood jets out of the lawnmower and it arcs. It arcs into a kind of satanic rainbow that she sees. He goes down in the basement, gets the scopolamine. So in the end, he kills her, or he stuffs her mouth with the ashes of the burning book. And this is after she's killed the cop, and then two more cops, then another more cops. She's gonna kill them. Now it's in the news that he's missing, and so she knows it's almost up, and he has to finish the book. He knows that they're gonna die in this double unaliving, so he plans his ceremony. Sorry. So he plans this ritualistic ceremony where he burns the book Prospero style. I'll burn my books. And then he stuffs her mouthful of ashes. She dies. And what does he do right after he dies? He rolls through the house looking for the drug stash. He goes back to the Oxycontin, morphine, Percodan, Percocet, Librium, Valium, hydromorphone, hydrocodone, Vicodin, Norco, methadone, Hall, and he finds it. He takes his opiates right after he kills this bitch. He ransacks ransack the house for every morphine pill and syringe you can find because she's been shooting him with hypodermic needles full of morphine. And GTFO. He GTFOs. And then he crawls out. The cops are driving by. They go, oh, shit, that's Paul Sheldon. He is alive. He makes his way out, and he lives. And then in the last section, it returns to the beginning. He hears the sound, even in his haze, and he starts to conjure her wherever he sees her because his book is successful. And his book is the book that he wrote while he was in captivity. And it's a bestseller, of course. Right? So he starts to see her everywhere. And he even says on page 305, Paul closed his eyes, swaying unsteadily on his twisted, aching legs, waiting to see if he was going to get mad or cry. He cries continuously throughout the book. He's in such pain. And he says he hoped he would get mad. He didn't want to cry out here in the hall, but he might. His legs hurt all the time, and he wanted his dope. Not the heavy-duty aspirin they gave him at the hospital dispensary. He wanted his good dope, his Annie dope. And oh, he was so tired all the time. What he needed to prop him up were not those shitty sticks, but his make-believe games and stories. They were the good dope, the never-fail fix, but they had all fled. It seemed like playtime was over. Isn't it crazy that that's how he describes his captivity? And he basically says, at chapter 7 of this last section, there was no Annie because Annie had not been a goddess at all, only a crazy lady who had hurt Paul for reasons of her own. Annie had managed to pull most of her paper out of her mouth and throat and had gotten out through Paul's window while Paul was sleeping the sleep of drugs. She had gotten to the barn and had collapsed there. She was dead when the two cops found her, but not of strangulation. She'd actually died of the fractured skull she'd received when she struck the mantel, and she had struck the mantel because she had tripped. She was in this way, she'd been killed by the very typewriter Paul hated so much. And he realizes that it was her. She's the one who gave him the inspiration to do this stuff. He says, so in gratitude and in terror, he did. The hole opened and Paul stared through at what was there, unaware that his fingers were picking up speed, unaware that his aching legs were in the same city but 50 blocks away, unaware that he was sleeping as he wrote. So he becomes bonded to the bond paper that he uses to create his stories, and it's like he's living his own story in the past, present, and future. He becomes, in a sense, a true artist through this experience, and he will occasionally unconsciously conjure Annie up, which scares him, ignites the terror within him, like turning on that toaster and watching it burn, and that's how he writes his works. So this is a commentary. The book is, yes, it's a commentary on the writer and what the writer goes through. It's a commentary on obsession and fandom. It's a commentary and a critique of how the artist deals with addiction. But it's also a pretty brilliant work, but architecturally designed in the narrative to convey to the reader and mirror to the reader one's own deepest sense of both isolation and creation and what it takes to live life. So I think this is a pretty fantastic book, Misery. I think that the movie is certainly worth watching. Was she planning to eventually kill him? Yes. So what she was planning to do was he was going to finish the last chapter, and he was going to show it to her. She got him his champagne and his cigarette, but he used the cigarette as a ruse. Instead of lighting the cigarette, he lit the book on fire with kerosene that he found when he was in the basement with the rats and the rat traps. That's how he came up with the mousetrap and Hamlet, the Hamlet idea. And after he finished the book, then she was going to annihilate both of. He was going to unalive both of them in probably in her eyes the most inverse glorious act of the welding of fan and artist and art and creator of art. Totally sick. Totally real sick stuff here, folks. We have some really, really sick people. But this is highly relevant, highly revelatory, and I think that it's a pretty good book. He sold his soul to her. Well, he didn't sell it to her, and he walks away with his soul, and she takes it. She is the one who steals it from him. But in a sense, I mean, because what's really great about this book is that he doesn't go through a thing where he's willing to give in order to take. He's not willing to go through the things in order to get his drugs. It's not like he's making a bargain. It's a bargain that he didn't realize that he was in. And once he realizes it, he kind of does what he can to get out of it. But he realizes in the afterthought that this is what it's done to him, and that it's making him create he realizes it while he's writing the book that, he's putting himself through this thing. But it's not like there's a time in the book where he's like, oh, I could get out, and he doesn't get out. That would be truly he would realize that he's making this bargain, but he doesn't get out. It's not like he sees the open window or the locks or he can get out. He's in such actual physical pain. The physical pain is what covers this psychic, mental, addictive, spiritual pain that he goes through. But it is interesting how it's set up without dialectics in this. I mean, I think it's really creatively done. But, I think that what's really interesting is that you can read or watch this movie. You can read the book or watch the movie as a kind of escapism where you go, oh, I want to be in a snowy place. Okay, so back to the super chat that Pim asked. He said about the snow. What does the snow represent? Well, the snow, in a way, represents, you could say it represents Stephen King's own yayo addiction. You could say it represents the cold exterior with the warm interior of the house, which is an inverse of her. She's warm on the outside and cold on the inside. But what I think it really represents, if anything, if I look into it figuratively, is a kind of ninth circle of hell. I mean, he's been into this place, and he's with this full-on idolatrous, demon golem woman in the abyss, the total abyss. And the abyss is not one of heat and flames, which do occur in the book, but it's one of ice. It's total ice and nothingness. He's looking around, and it's just far. It's far from heat and warmth and other people, is my sort of interpretation for this. So let's get to see if we got some memberships, some super chats. Anybody still got time if you want to donate, if you want me to read your super chats. And next up, I'll be doing, I think, Franz Kafka's The Trial, which was a sponsor stream. Shouts out to Pim again for that $10 about Stephen King. First Person Q gifted a membership. Thank you so much, First Person Q. Mud dropped that $2. Do you like the book of the movie more? I answered that one. Mud became a high IQ book enjoyer. Thank you so much. Pim dropped that $5 super chat. Thank you. Really appreciate y'all. And let's look at some other super chats we got here. What's this voicemail? Oh my gosh. So annoying. What is this? Is this a weekday? What is this, Wednesday night? Hey, shouts out to Presley Stutz, who, by the way, is sponsored a stream, and I got that coming up. Thanks for all you do, man. He drops four. Presley drops 420, man. Thank you for all you do, man. Wonderfully great lit stream, as I've come to expect. Kang. Thank you, Presley. Really appreciate you. Thank you so much. You are the best. Shouts out to DPH, Church of the Eternal Logos, that I did that last stream with Citizen Kane. That was a lot of fun. I'm really glad that we got to do that together. If you guys want to see us do anything else together, drop either one of us a fat chat or just some suggestions, and we will get to those. Love doing streams with my friend David Patrick Harry. He's great. You're one of the best. David Patrick Harry is one of the best. I know that, you got, look, I don't want to be too sentimental here, but I know that you guys, we all watch our friends do streams and stuff. But David Patrick Harry is, if you can believe it, even warmer, even sweeter and warmer, and just a genuine dude and a good friend off the stream than he is on the stream, if that could even be possible. But he is a great guy, and I really love him. He's been a good friend to me, very fantastic guy. Very fantastic, folks. Great guy, great guy. So thank you to David Patrick Harry. Love him. Shouts out to Derek out there for that $5 PayPal. Really appreciate you. Thank you, Derek. I appreciate that. Hey, shouts out to John for that $5, that $4.85. Thank you for that PayPal. Thank you so much for your support. $5 means so much to me, especially when the damn McChicken, just the McChicken, costs $5 now, man. Crazy, crazy. So thank you so much for that. Hey, shouts out to Jason. Always the best. We love our Jason. Thank you for that $8 PayPal. You are the best. Thank you so much, Jason, for all you do. Let's see. We got a Cash Appski in here. Who's this? This is our friend. Crystalline. Thank you to Crystalline, who drops that $5 on Cash Appski. And let's see. Thanks for the epic analysis. Oh, it's a personalized note with a green starry sky. Thank you so much, Crystalline. You are the best. Everybody sub to Slowboy Whiteboard out there, of course. Always consistent, always the best. Thank you. Thank you for being here always. Thank you for listening to me and for being so awesome. Crystalline says, you think he's a good speaker on camera, but I've seen him give a speech live and it knocks your socks off. She's talking about DPH there, I'm sure. Yeah, DPH is wonderful and look, man, I'm just telling you, I'm going through this in my life. I know we all are. It's especially hard to connect with people, I think, when you're in your 30s and 40s. That's all over the place. And so when we find people in our circles and we find people that are, first of all, real human beings, right? And based friends, genuine friends, we definitely appreciate that. And I think that's about it. If you want to sponsor a stream, you can do that on any of the links. You can hit me up at madmaximalism with 2 X's at gmail.com. That's where you can find me. You can send me a note. You can reply or please leave a comment after the stream is over. Please like and share. You guys help me to get these numbers up. We need to get these numbers up, especially on the last couple of streams. I mean, that Citizen Kane stream, I need to get my numbers up here. I was really happy with my Bret Easton Ellis, the Shards analysis. You can also go back and watch my Arabian Nights analysis, any of those. We've done a lot of work here. So, look, Maddie, Digital Minefield has a stream coming up on the 18th. So everybody go to Digital Minefield, sub to him. Shouts out to all my friends out there, especially Jay, Jamie, David Patrick Harry, Rachel. Shouts out to Rachel for that 10,000 subs that she's got. Good for Rachel. That's awesome. I love to see people succeeding and doing the best at what they can do. I mean, we got to lift each other up and support each other. I've been so supported by our friends, so thank you for that so much. Last message, a lot going on in the world. And I went to a thing this past weekend for, again, one of my friends who passed away. And then, it just keeps on coming. Okay. And so I'm telling you, you love your friends and family, because we don't know the time or the place. It could come at any time where we're looking for that last breath. And so, reach out. I just figure I'm just not advice. I'm just a dude. All I'm saying is it's important to reach out to the people that you care about right now. Do it right now. I'm serious. I'm serious about this. People, it's very hard for people to reach out to you. You can't count on them to reach out to you. At least that's my. I don't know. It's not advice. I'm just saying that's experience. You know, I'm an old wise fella in my 40s. All I'm saying is, you can't wait for them to reach out to you. They're not going to make the effort. You can't put your friends to the test. They're not going to pass the test that you give them. It's just never going to happen. So you got to do all the work. And that's good. Good. That's a good feeling. You know? All the work. It's how hard is it? You know, all you got to do is call somebody. It's important. Listen, I spent some time with one of my best friends this past weekend. I'm just going to share something he told me. So his cousin passed away all of a sudden. He was 6 years older than us. We were 18 years old. He was 6 years older. And my friend told me that he had this black book. You know, it was like a spiral notebook he had. And every day, well, what happened was my friends asked him one time, what's that book and who are all these people in the book? And he said to him, these are my friends and these are people that I know. And every Sunday I sit down and I call my friends. I go through a list and I try and call a certain number of people every Sunday. And he said, why? Why do you do that? And he said, I just reach out to them. And his cousin told him, you've got to reach out to people. There's nothing more important than your friends and family in your daily life. There's God and your friends and family, and you've got to connect with them. And these are wise words. These are words from an older father figure, and this guy was like 24. And then he was gone. He was gone. And and he left a great big hole, right? And he wasn't my cousin, but I still think about him every day. And I just think, you know, you got to do the things you're going to do now. So if you haven't talked to your buddy that hadn't talked to you in a while and you don't think they're ever going to call you or whatever, and I'm just as shitty as everybody else. I know that. I can say one thing and then do or not do another. But I'm saying I try and hold this, you know, that you gotta call them. Just call them and say, what's up? Because you never know. It could be it. That could be it. And I'm finding that a lot more in my life. And so what a blessing it is for us to have friends and family that we can reach out to, right? That we can love, that we're allowed to love. Yo, shouts out to Ethan, sent me $8. Appreciate that on Cash Appski. Thank you so much. Says, I'll take that BLA advice. Yeah, again, thank you. I appreciate it. And it's not advice. I'm just some dude. Honestly, obviously. So take what you will of that. But I think that coming from anybody would be a good thing to do. And we often forget that sort of thing. So whatever. But thank you for that $8. I really appreciate that. So call your mom. You never know. You know, call them. So this stream goes out. This stream is dedicated. Goes out to my mom and to Liz. I love you. Hey, whoa, look at that. Hey, shouts out. There's a big one. Shouts out to Adam. Drops $50 on Venmo. Appreciate you, bud. Hey, Adam, I appreciate you too, sir. Thank you so much. I really do appreciate that. That means a whole lot. You know how long you have to work to make $50? So I appreciate that. I know how long you have to work to make $50. Damn. Work sucks. So again, this stream goes out to my mom. Love you. And to Liz. Love you so much. You are the best person. I love you so much. And now it's here forever, hopefully. And I love you. And you, like you said in Master and Commander, you make my heart glow. So, I mean that truly. You make my heart glow. You make my past, my present, and my future glow from knowing you. I love you so much. All right. That's all I got. Hey, shouts out to everybody. Thank you so much. Again, go to Rooks G and subscribe to him. He's got a new song coming out on Friday. We love our Rooks G. We love our Rooks G. And I think that is about it. That might do it. So, again, I'll be back soon with friends. Franz Kafka's The Trial, and a bunch of other stuff. We were going to do Civil War, but I'm going to hold off on that one. If you've seen Civil War, let me know. A bunch of people have let me know on that. The Alex Garland film. We've done a bunch of Alex Garland, but we'll see. If you want to see that, let me know. If you want to see an analysis on that. And I'm actually going to leave you tonight with Melaforta's Oracular. Thank you to Melaforta who let me use this in the membership stream the other night. Please go to Melaforta, and I will drop the link once this starts. This is her Oracular. She's a good friend of the stream. Please go to her channel and subscribe and look at her music. Listen to her music. Watch her streams. Watch her drum and bass streams. Hey, Crystalline, thank you for that link you sent me, by the way. I really appreciate it. And, hey, everybody out there, I hope you have, listen, folks, you are absolute governors. You are a wonderful people. I hope you have a wonderful week in all seriousness. I hope you have a fantastic week. Go out there and win. Get those dubs. Win. Serve. Love God. Love your neighbor. Love your friends and family. Reach out to them. Tell some stories. Learn some jokes. Give me some good dad jokes. I got some in the pocket, but I'm going to leave them for the next time. Even though I'm not a dad, but, Anyway. So, that's all I got, you guys. Here is Melaforta with Oracular. Thank you. And again, that was Stephen King's Misery. I did the Stargate Monarch Firestarter stream. Bunch of them, they're in the links in the description in the video. Thank you so much. Here we go. Let's go. Here's the link right here. Was it worth it? Yeah, it's worth it. If you're strong enough. Peace, y'all. Keep on LIBIN. Love y'all. Peace.